should have never sent that.
Thank you.
So, how did the collaboration with Swatch come about?
So, Swatch has had a really long history of supporting action sports, snowboard event. I mean, they were one of the early sponsors of snowboard events. And so, and it's ebbed and flowed in their history, and they were rekindling that, and I ended up becoming an athlete with Swatch, and then I had some goals that I wanted to achieve in my snowboarding, which led to me making my first film, Deeper, and Swatch signed on for that. They were the first people to sign on to that. That ended up being a successful project, which then led to Further and Higher, these 3 films over 6 years. And then I really, along that way, I realized that there's a book in there that I want to release that shows this beautiful imagery that the photographers captured, coupled with my words that I felt like was the real story of these. More so, we kind of failed as movie makers to give the viewer that level of inside perspective on what I was doing in the mountains, and that coincided with let's do the book and have and tie it to a watch and kind of commemorate this 6-year journey that we have did, and to bring something to the world that has some more depth than just a watch and just a book and so I think that that was the root of it.
Deeper, Further, and Higher, that's your personal mantra. And it's also etched on the side of the watch as well, right? What does this mean to you, and why did you choose to include it on the watch?
Yeah, so I came up with Deeper, Further, Higher. I was at kind of a crossroads in my snowboarding, and I was getting ready to divert from working with these film companies, and I did 45 films, all with chairlifts, snowmobiles, or helicopters, and I decided to go foot powered, and I was kind of but I had a lot of fear in doing that because I got paid off of starring in these big snowboard films, and I kind of just wrote Deeper, Further, Higher down as something that a path that I was largely on in snowboarding, and I felt like I had stalled out, meaning I was going to the same places over and over again, and I had stopped that evolution with my snowboarding and as a person, and I used that to kind of give me the confidence and as like a barometer in my life that I had been following, felt like I had stopped following that and need to get back on track. And really any one of these films could have been called Deeper, Further, Higher. It's just a way for me to not be stagnant and strive for to find new ground as a person.
And that also, you kind of answered like one of my other questions where, you've cut back on using heli and lifts, and
right.
It reminds me of that saying, it's not so much the destination, but the journey that counts. Do you feel that that's where
absolutely. I think, one of my, the taglines that for Further was, the journey is the reward. And if you you gotta love the process. If you don't, and your eye is on the final outcome, it's, for one, and what I do with foot powered snowboarding, it's so rare that all the pieces line up and we get to ride this movie worthy deal. But I've since evolved on that, and this also that I believe that the act requires total focus, and that focusing on the destination takes away precious focus on the act, and can be very dangerous.
Where do you see snowboarding going heading in terms of, do you see it going more backcountry and exploring like what you do, or do you see versus parks and resorts?
I do think we'll continue to see some growth in backcountry snowboarding. It's just not it's such a rich experience that you don't need to go to the far edges of the world to experience it. You can go to I get a ton of satisfaction out of driving down the road to a spot that is very accessible. It's not dangerous, and hiking up and snowboarding back down. And I think that a lot of people will, are realizing that is really enjoyable. But it's also highlighted my time at the resort, meaning I don't go on those really crowded days, but the 70% of my snowboarding is on a split board with a backpack on and hiking in the mountains. So then to go at the resort and take a lift to the top with no backpack and play around is really exciting. And I think that, so we'll see the backcountry growth, but I think we're gonna start seeing a continued growth in just all mountain snowboarding, kind of turning that like doing resort laps into it's kind of like street skating almost. And I think the parks, what I've been really looking for, and I think it's coming, I could be wrong on this, but I want to see, we're so stuck in this like cheese wedge single dimension jumps, and all the parks are the same, and it's like, let's get a third dimension into there and turn them into like these bowls. And
I think there's this company out in Japan, Agentum, I think.
Yeah, totally.
And they carve out like bowls and stuff.
Totally.
And their boards are also more like fishes. They look like twin fins.
Yeah, you have to see. I have a board over here that
and I think
you'll be psyched to see. And the beauty with that, as is, I'm on this, what I call my fourth coming of skateboarding right now, where my kids got me into a park. And the beauty with these kind of banks and stuff is that it, from an intermediate to a pro, it's very fulfilling, as is your kind of skate park right now. I mean, and a pro goes to my skate park and is getting 5 feet out. I'm at the skate park just happy to be able to run some clean lines through the bowl and not have to climb back out of it. And right now in snowboarding, we have all these cheese wedges that it's too easy to get 40 feet into the air. And we don't need to be 40 feet in the air.
Doesn't showcase your skill, it showcases the fact that you can jump really, really high.
Yeah, and like a pro will come into these new kind of same deal with like also just doing these like kind of riding the piste and hitting these side hits and stuff. Like a pro's going 8 feet out and like getting a perfect grab, and intermediates like just doing all they can just to ride up that hit and ride back down. And that to me showcases more talent.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see more natural terrain bumps and kind of carves, and it'd be interesting.
I think it's coming. I've been really preaching to my home resort is these, what I call like enhanced groomers, like where you take a section, and right now we have our terrain parks, or these and the economics of it all. I mean, it's just there's so many, even just snake runs. I mean, God, it's so exciting, like the bank slaloms. I mean, I go on and on about the stuff, but I mean, you're seeing 500 people show up to a bank slalom contest, and you go to the slopestyle contest and there's 50 people showing up.
That makes sense. It makes sense because it's based on your ability, and as you progress, you can approach it differently.
Yeah.
And it's not like you said, it's not this giant wedge that your skill level has to be at a certain point for you to even attempt to hit it.
Right.
Whereas something where it's like bumps and banks.
Yeah, you just roll through it, and
you can just get a feel for actually learning how to move through it and understanding how your body works. And and it also goes into like my whole, like you have this thing where you understand snow, like you understand the conditions. There's only one other person that I think that I can kind of equate that with, and that's Slater. Like the way he understands a wave, I think you understand snow the same way. So I think it's just from doing it and from being.
It's time for sure. Absolutely.
And I think those kind of parks give people that time to actually understand the actual mechanics that it takes to be actually good. Whereas, you know, I mean, you get kids who just learn how to go down, and then they have a trampoline in the backyard and they learn how to flip.
Totally. And it's, I mean, I call it like the lost art of the turn. And the cool thing though is that, and I first wrote, I think 10 years ago, I wrote something about the lost art of the turn. And the exciting thing is in 2 years, that saying will be outdated because there's a bunch of attention on the turn now, and it's quickly no longer becoming a lost art. And you're going to see a huge trend in real focus on the turn, which is so exciting.
I mean, it's what it makes. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what, I mean, we all evolved from it. It's that bottom turn.
It's the coolest trick in snowboarding, man.
That bottom turn. I mean, look, Lopez.
Dude, when you go out with surfers, and I've been fortunate enough to ride with a bunch of pro surfers, it's the carve that the turns. I mean, they like the airs and stuff, but they're just like, oh my God, the turns. And it was a trip. I was just in Austria and on a shoot, and I had nothing to do with it. And the creative brief came through on the deal, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, well, what are we gonna do? They were like, we really want to shoot some carving. I'm like, I haven't shot carving in 15 years. Holy shit, that's cool. That was the last thing I thought you were gonna say. And it actually was this really fun, creative experience.
It's what it's about. I think it's that movement. It's that symmetry. Okay. Now I like all my questions just kind of rearranged based on how you answered them. Being the founder of Protect Our Winters and seeing that you're on the forefront of nature, you know, you're out there in nature, what changes have you seen in terms of global warming?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I've seen significant changes, and I think the people, as you said, I mean, in my job, I have to be very in tune with nature. Meaning, you know, I notice every little texture of snow, but I also see the different, you know, how mountains change from year to year, and it's been significant. And it's the rate in change is really shocking. And I guess extreme weather events is one thing. For example, in Alaska, I mean, God, I'm trying to keep it more simple, but really just rising snow levels, the ability, like we have zones that it's so rare for us to be able to get into the lower elevation areas. the shortening of winters, the speed in which these glaciers are shrinking. I mean, glaciers absolutely are always moving, and it's not. It's common for a glacier to retreat for 100 years, but what's happening is the rate of retreat is at such an extreme level right now that it is shocking.
You can imagine. Oh. Nice.
Rain to the top, which again in my world, that leads to a complex snowpack, which leads to higher avalanche danger. We're getting rain to the. I mean, you talk to these locals in Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole's really cold area, Utah. We've had rain to the top of those mountains midwinter. I mean, that
Non-existent.
it's maybe never happened. If it has happened, I mean, it hasn't happened in 40, 50, 60. I mean, these old timers have never seen rain to the top. Now it's not that common to see rain to the top. So those things like that are just becoming more and more frequent, unfortunately.
A lot less snow and a lot less.
Yeah, I mean, you do with that. There is the extreme weather in the sense of take my range. 5 years ago, we had the biggest winter ever recorded, followed by 4 years ago was the worst winter. 3 years ago was worse than that. 2 years ago was worse than that. This year was worse than that. So we've had largely 5 record-breaking winters on different scale. One being, which was awesome, the most snow, followed by the next winter with the least snow. So that erraticness of it, and you're seeing, and I think we'll see these like the most snow totals in 48 hours, the coldest temperature, and I mean we've had more snow in my town in between June and October than we have in November and January the last 3 years. Yeah, so shit like that, so it's
kind of like
just
the
erratic.
season just flopped in some sense.
It's not flop because this one, we haven't had a touch of snow. So for it to snow a little bit in June and July and September, is something.
Yeah.
But yeah, these, it's just erratic stuff. We're seeing in Alaska this snowpack that traditionally we would only see in Colorado, as we're now seeing it on coastal Alaska, meaning they're having these extreme cold cycles that create these crystals that create bad avalanche danger, which have led to these deaths in Alaska that in the past have been largely unheard of.
It's kind of somber.
Well, I can go upbeat on you too.
No, it's cool. I mean,
there is. The reality. That's just our world.
Yeah, we don't live as harmonious as we should with nature.
Right.
It's more about our conveniences than actually trying to live within the actual constraints of nature.
Right. But we are change. There's exciting stuff going on. The reality is, though, that doesn't mean the next winter we're all of a sudden gonna. The work that we do at Protect Our Winters is for my kids' kids.
It's not undoable.
It's not. Well, there's a big difference between runaway 4 degrees increase and 2 degrees increase. And right now we're fighting for a 2-degree increase in global temperature, and that's still totally achievable. And this erraticness is that's us. We'll have to hopefully at the very least that's adapting to, wow, we got the biggest snowstorm ever, to like you know what? We don't have that much snow this year. Time to go mountain biking. But there's some positive stuff on the environmental front right now, and I don't know if more so than in the 8 years that I've been hyper focused on it, I could ever say.
Well, any parting words?
No, I feel like that, you know, the positive side of of what, you know, that we are, that again, there's some exciting stuff happening environmentally, which there hasn't been exciting stuff it's been you know, we've been beating our head against the walls for a long time. It feels like real change is in the air right now.
Thank you.
No worries.